we talk a lot about how the country is changing. And what I like to talk a lot about is that the country is actually not changing. The country has changed.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella-Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella-Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella-Williamson. This season, our focus is on communication specialties. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Macias. Stephen leads the multicultural marketing and comms practice at IPG's Rogers Cowan PMK. IPG is one of the top 4 global holding companies in the world, and R&C PMK is recognized as one of the leading agencies in the world focused on clients in the brand and talent space. Stephen founded the practice at R&C PMK as well as his last agency, MWW, 8 years ago. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited to speak with you today. Tell us a little bit more about your background and what you're doing these days.
Well, my background is a very nonlinear approach to the career that I have now. And I have been working in the multicultural LGBTQ space for about 23 years now. Working around a number of different types of businesses that were all really focused on finding ways to amplify marginalized voices, finding ways to connect brands and consumers together in an authentic way and not an opportunistic way. But for a number of years, I ran a publishing company called Here Publishing, where I ran several magazine properties, The Advocate, Out Magazine, and HIV Plus Magazine. These are some of the really quintessential LGBTQ media brands, but within the context of our LGBTQ community, we also intersect with women's issues and with communities of color around the idea of intersectionality that we really built our business at the time. What did outreach look like if you were a lesbian who identified as Hispanic living in Los Angeles? What are those strategies to be able to connect authentically? After I left Here Publishing, I opened my own agency where I focused in on those exact things, working with communities of color, the LGBTQ community, gender-related issues, and really built up my own agency independently before my agency was purchased by MWWPR. Where they brought me on to run my client roster, as well as help them expand their business for the first time into the areas of multicultural marketing and communication. So working there for a number of years with clients like Hilton Worldwide, working with Doritos, working with television shows, launching them, whether it was Orange is the New Black, working on Transparent for Amazon Studios, Pose, with FX, and a number of films as well that really focused in on diverse communities, whether it was The Danish Girl or was Loving, really a lot of Oscar campaigns that we had the pleasure and the privilege of working on. So after working at MWW for a number of years, I moved my business over to where I'm at now, which is Rogers Cowan PMK, one of IPG's agencies across the world.
Well, that's really a great segue into the next question I had for you, which, I'm thinking about multicultural communications. It's changed so much over the years. I love how you frame that up for us, that it's not just about ethnicity, and really it's about all the different types of cultures we have as people, right? Mm-hmm. But you've been working in this space for many years. What changes have you seen in this almost, over 2 decades that you have in this space?
Well, I think, the most important change is the data and analytics that explains how the country has changed, right? So, this most recent census where it really showed us how the demographics of the United States are shifting, whether it's the ongoing explosion of the Hispanic population in the United States, or for the first time, a decrease in birth rates for those Americans who identify as Caucasian. And, we talk a lot about how the country is changing. And what I like to talk a lot about is that the country is actually not changing. The country has changed. Mm. And when we think about the past 20 years that I've been working in this field and really sort of focusing my efforts on connecting brands with consumers, what corporations, what companies, what businesses have also recognized is that their consumer base has changed, and what they've had to do and adjust accordingly is to change that idea or that narrative of what it is that a general marketplace approach is supposed to do, to be able to collect as many sort of new eyeballs or new consumers or influence choice. And now the multicultural space really in a lot of ways has become the new general marketplace. I think certainly within our major cities, the term minority majority is very accurate. If you are in a city like Los Angeles, where I'm at, you look at different parts of the United States, whether it's Miami, whether it's Chicago, whether it's New York, and you see that the face of what America looks like is very different than what it was. And I think for a long time, our marketing directives were really leaning into that general marketplace approach, with the multicultural as a nice to have or maybe in next year's budget. But that's a very large shift when you think about how it is that budgets are being planned against what it is that the country now looks like.
Yeah, those are great points. I mean, really, from that nice to have to a must, right? I'm coming out of San Antonio, and in San Antonio, the Hispanic population is the majority. So it does shape your paradigm, both as an individual, especially if you're of that culture, and as someone who does marketing or PR for the city. But the state now, and you mentioned the census, like our state results are pretty exciting too, because now we're complete equal counterparts to our Caucasian or white, population members. And that's new for the state. And the face of, right, I think it's always had a good mix of multiculturalism in it, but I guess recognizing that and having that represented was the difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot of, I think, mistakes that we see sometimes when an agency has really focused on this more kind of cookie cutter, general market, like all size fits one approach. So what tips do you have for a professional who's trying to make some changes in their organization, or maybe an agency that wants to improve their multicultural efforts?
Well, it starts with having a diverse collection of executives around the table to begin with, right? So if you've got, I remember a photo that I saw a few years ago of a group of elected officials sort of talking about changes that they wanted to make towards their state's health policies for women. What types of health care would be provided, what kinds of budgets should they be thinking about. But what was interesting about that photo that I was looking at is it was all men.
Right.
Talking about what types of levels of health care that the state would be providing for women. And I think, that it reminded me of the many years of tables where I would be the only person of color around a conversation where, strategies and execution were being decided by a homogenous group of people. So having diverse hiring is not something that's just a check the box and should not be something that's performative. Having diverse hiring should be transformative for your business, for your clients, and for what it is that you're offering your clients. So that's what I would say at the very top, the first part. The other part that I would think about is that you talked about sort of a cookie cutter approach that some have approached the strategy in reaching folks like us in the United States. What I think we really need to think about is that the communities who you're trying to reach, we have found our voices. And so if you're presenting a cookie cutter approach to reaching a Hispanic audience when you are truly trying to reach a Mexican American audience or a Puerto Rican audience or a Cuban American audiences, our voices now are going to be heard right back to the brand. What you're talking about not only is not speaking to me and to my family and to my part of what makes this beautiful Hispanic population, but I find it offensive that you didn't spend any more time in your efforts to be able to make a choice to spend our money with you that you didn't spend the time to understand that this effort isn't speaking to us, and yet it's being directed us. And we're going to let you know about that. So I think that's one of the other things to think about as it relates to how it is that we approach these marketing and public relations and communications campaigns.
Right.
We are not monolithic. We are not cookie cutter, and that we are no longer, in many places of the country, the minority of a population. So it's important really to take those things into consideration as you look towards the future.
Yeah, excellent, excellent points. You had said earlier too, like the public base has changed. And I'm also seeing as a PR pro, like public sentiment has changed so much and it can change so rapidly. Terms that we were using that were adopted really in the common vernacular and how we said and wrote things may not be acceptable today. And even the terms that people are selecting to use to identify their heritage or their background may not be the same across individuals, even within the same cultural group. So really what you're pointing to also is asking and listening,
Yeah.
right? And building something with executives that have the actual leadership and they can have the funds that can make the change, but working with the communities instead of pushing something on them or on us. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. You're reminding me of something that came up in a meeting I was in a few weeks ago that's really stuck with me, which is sometimes you need to listen to understand, not listen to reply and to execute. And I think that, the more and more we understand who our consumers are and what our multicultural families look like, what our interracial families look like, that was another really interesting point of growth, the sort of blended expectations of a family that may be blended, that may be a mixed race. What does that consumer look like? So listening to understand versus listening to reply is something that I hope more and more marketers across the country will do as they figure out how it is to reach us authentically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that I honor that the work is not easy and it's not easily done. And it is hard to do it the right, quote unquote, right way, right? But I think when you have the good intentions and you are listening, you're working with your community, I think you're going forward in the right manner.
Yeah.
And the idea that you are working on that just shows how much purpose can be in PR and marketing. So I love that you highlight that.
Yeah. I think we've all been in the front row to some degree to see how powerful language and words are. Certainly within our political system over the past 5 years, we see how people harness the power of language. We see how powerful diplomats across the world have been, on some level, much more effective than armies that come equipped with soldiers and military equipment and weapons of destruction. We see how powerful words and language can be as it relates to changing the narrative and changing how people look at each other, how people treat each other, and how people feel about themselves. So absolutely, the power of communications and public relations are going to be the front and center for at least the rest of my lifetime.
I sure hope so. I do feel like these last few years have validated PR professional space in communication.
Yeah.
So you've had a lot of experience and you've seen a lot of really great things happen in this space. What are some of the best ways you've seen brands really connect with LGBTQ or communities of color or women as stakeholders?
I mean, there are so many good examples now, which I think is part of what I love about seeing programs come to life, is that I know behind the scenes, those teams that have been working thoughtfully and tirelessly and putting together multicultural campaigns are getting more fuel put back in their tank because they're seeing the impact that their campaigns have. I think the most recent campaign that really struck a chord for me was something out of the Doritos brand about Dia de los Muertos. And that was it reminded me a little bit of Disney's Coco, the animated film. It was a family going to remember and pay tribute to an uncle that had passed. And you see the elderly woman whose brother it was. You see the uncle sort of, through the animation come back to life, and they're so excited to see him for the moment there with the day. And then from behind him comes another man. And they had said, "Who is this?" And in Spanish, he responds, "This is my partner." And there's a moment where you're not sure how the family, the Mexican-American family, the Mexican family is going to react. But the elderly woman gets tears in her eyes, and she's so happy that her brother has a partner for life and post the world that we live in. And it's just a beautiful piece of celebration there. I think, looking at a campaign with MasterCard this past year that was driven out of some of our agency and our agency partners with Respect the Film, and Jennifer Hudson as the spokesperson around a campaign and a program where MasterCard is helping small businesses, specifically businesses that are being driven and created by women of color, that we know were disproportionately hit during the pandemic and during this sort of national and global shutdown. That's another great campaign. And, those two things have something in common, is that they inspire and evoke an emotional connection. They speak to the better angels on our shoulders about how it is that we can collectively come together and feel something positive. I think that for all campaigns, whether it's a general marketplace campaign or a multicultural campaign, when you speak to a consumer's better angels against the backdrop of a divisive and polarized country and world, you're going to stand out. You're going to stand out in a way that people remember. And I think for marketers and communication folks, being able to create a campaign that makes people feel connected to your brand through something authentic, something purpose-driven, something that connects with something that they haven't felt in a while. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's empathy. Those are the things that are going to make a difference in 2022.
I love all that. And strong examples, very powerful. We can find ways to connect while being different, right? We can be allies without othering someone else. Trying to be an ally doesn't have to mean you have to be polarizing to do so. And I love the idea because what you describe, these commercials really show kind of a connection through shared values.
Yeah.
Like Doritos, you're talking about that, like the respect for the heritage and the culture and the respect for abuela. Like that's very universal. And that's why I think Coco hit in such a special way. I've been hearing more about value graphics and thinking about using value graphics instead of demographics. So value graphics are kind of like psychographics, right?
Right.
So what people care about and what drives them. And I like this theory. And I'm going to read that book because I want to understand more. And because I think a lot about the why. And I think if you think about that why, and you are listening and you're asking questions, you're inviting all types of people to the table, I think you'll be able to find those connections. And then you create commercials and campaigns and messages and movements that really resonate. And to your point, are those good angels on our shoulders that kind of lift us up, right? Without pushing others down.
Yeah. And I think that all of us are looking for something that will lift us up. And I got to tell you, though, I think the challenge that we need to think about as we're looking for those areas to lift us up. I've always thought to myself, the politics or messaging of fear only need to be half as good to move people than the politics or the message of hope. We really have to appeal to our better angels in a very, very substantiated way.
Yeah.
People have some of the best data and research to make those choices as marketers and as communications experts. And that's all inside your own head and your heart. What are those things that make you feel like changing your mind about something? What are those images that you see that make you want to make a different choice about, where you're going for vacation, knowing that you'll be welcomed there? All of those things that are in textbooks, in our data and analytics out of our great platforms, really have to be in conjunction, those learned experiences that we have through data with our own lived experiences. And I think that when you combine your lived and learned experiences as a practitioner, that's a winning recipe to be able to bring forward a campaign that's going to connect with people.
Yeah. And if you keep broadening those horizons so that your lived experiences are more than just what you did 10 years ago, that matters a whole lot, right?
100%. Yes, exactly. I love going to a city that I've never been to before and just literally giving myself the permission to walk out the front door of the hotel and get lost.
Yeah.
wander through a city, sit down at a small restaurant, to be able to experience the hospitality of somebody welcoming you to your city for the first time. I remember driving through Texas, coming back from a road trip, and just the warmth of the people in San Antonio was something that I remember above all else when I let myself get lost to be able to, have some food and just look around, chat with people, tell them, I'm visiting for the first time, and be able to get some really wonderful, kind reception from people. Those are the things that are helpful in expanding your horizons, for me at least.
Yeah, I'm glad you experienced that. That is something that we talk about a lot here in San Antonio.
Hmm.
Well, we've had a great discussion and you have learned so much in your time, but looking back in your career, was there anything about multicultural communication you wish you had known when you got started or something we should know now?
Well, I think, again, sort of bringing it back to what it is that each person brings to the table. My family were farm workers in Central California. And, during the time that I grew up, and still, sometimes our migrant farm working force has not been treated with respect, has not been given the proper collection of things that a normal job might afford you, whether that's a living wage or clean drinking water or time carved out for lunch or for a break or for even the bathroom. Growing up in a time where people oftentimes marginalize Mexicans across the board. I think one of the things growing up that I wish that I had done or had in my own toolkit outside of my family's, unwavering support was the level of confidence that I've grown into over the years, and being proud about where I come from, being proud of who I am, and being proud of my family. And I think that's one of the things that I would say to young people, young parents: make sure that your children move into school, move into their educational process, move into their chosen careers, whether it's marketing and communications or being a doctor or a lawyer or owning a small business. Instill in them a sense of confidence of who they are, regardless of what other people may try to take away from them, because that sense of confidence will absolutely be part and parcel in how it is that we collectively all move forward, how we honor not only our family now, but those generations of peoples whose shoulders that we truly do stand on. So I think that would be the one thing that I would say as somebody older now. I won't give my age because I was told I don't need to do that anymore. But but that sense of confidence, I think, is one of the things that I would 100% ask folks to focus in on as they raise their families, whether they're coming from Black, Brown, Asian, LGBTQ families, whatever that is. Just make sure that your foundation and your children's foundation is based in something that's confident about who they are and proud of where they came from.
That's really awesome. You had me thinking about several things there. Number one, I would say you should be very proud and confident of what you've done and what you're doing still, because the work that you have championed over the years has probably led to a lot of young professionals and young people who came behind you to feel more normal and confident in their own skins.
I hope so.
Yeah. So our work is to help shift for others and be that change maker, I think, in our work. And it's really, really important that we just continue this work. It can be heavy. And I think when you are really addressing societal gaps and issues, it can feel like some of the seeds that you plant, you won't see flourish in your time. But I think I've seen a lot of confidence being built and a lot of things sprouting over this pandemic, and particularly because maybe that's part of the great resignation we're hearing about, where everyone's kind of shifting their jobs and lives as they're saying, why not now? I do feel a stronger sense of agency within people.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope you feel that too.
Yeah, I do. And I think the work that is happening feels like there are so many people contributing to positive change, to demanding accountability, looking for impact, that, the challenging times that we're in definitely feel less burdensome or overwhelming, because there are so many people coming up from behind us who are taking on the mantle and really working to create change, positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Together is better, and it's a little less heavy if someone else is sharing that. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Stephen. So we've had such a great conversation. I love this real deep, analysis of things. So I'd like to ask my guests, what does smart talk mean to you?
Smart talk is about really having a conversation. Smart talk is about having a dialogue. Smart talk is about not presuming or assuming that you are the smartest person in the room. And I think, smart talk is about smart listening. And I think smart talk really is about helping move a collective forward and really looking at how it is that each one of us, whatever it is that we say, has a consequence on what it is that people do. And to be able to do that smartly, you really have to understand the conversation at its inception. So I think that's what smart talk means to me.
I love that. Couldn't have said that any smarter. Way to go. All right. Well, we have enjoyed my time with you, and I'm sure our listeners have too. What's the best way for them to connect with you offline or online?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Stephen Macias.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Terrific. What a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We love diving deep into communication topics to elevate our industry practice. If you're a new fan of the show, please rate and review it so others can find us. Or share the podcast or your favorite episode with your colleagues. Your referral is so appreciated. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit MWW360.com. That's MWW360.com.